Foul is Fair, Chapter 18, To the Gates. There was still no sign of Kasha or the cats as the girls made their way to the city. Lanny made them stop at a stream, this one thankfully devoid of flesh-eating fish, to refill their canteens. Megan quickly learned why. The terrain rapidly grew more and more lifeless, the green and the moss disappearing by the time they went over the last hill. Finally, she reached the top and caught her first glimpse of the city of Fingis. From the distance, it actually looked inviting, at least compared to the hills. The higher buildings, what she could see of them above the dark wall, looked to have once been brightly painted and still bore faded hints of the swirl of colors. "So, this is one of the lost cities?" Megan asked as they sat to rest. "It is," Lonnie said. "There's 4 of them. Mostly, I hear about them as the ultimate remodeling projects. Dad wants to get a huge crew together from the islands and just go to work." "What happened, anyway?" Lonnie looked around to make sure Aisling was out of earshot, but the pixie and the crow were safely off in the distance, scouting the route ahead. Different things to each city. Fingis used to be one of the favorites of the Fae. It was pretty close to Anchakjera, and the sorcerer who ruled there was Ixius, who used bardic magic, the music stuff. Some of those stories suggest he either taught that type of magic to the gods or to their mortal children. I don't know exactly. Anyway, it used to be a city of music and parties and things. I can see why it would be pretty popular. It looks like it was pretty colorful too. And it's not even that ruined. How long has it been abandoned? A really, really long time. The Fomori drove out the fairies from it. It was one of their last victories before the gods dragged them off for good. But before they left, they made sure the city would stay mostly standing, but the Fae couldn't use it. Why not? Cold iron. The whole city's surrounded by it. Everything is locked up. I can't imagine how much work it had to have been, but it was apparently worth it to have the ultimate insult sitting so close. My dad mentioned cold iron. I'd even heard of how it's supposed to be bad for fairies. But it's really that nasty, even just as, gates? Aside from the fact injuries don't just disappear the way they usually do for a lot of fairies, it cancels their magic. That doesn't seem that hard. Aren't most weapons made of iron? Or at least they were? Most weapons can sort of work for a little bit, and everything tends to work on half-bloods, so don't go testing this. But only cold raw iron cancels out proper fairy magic and leaves lasting or permanent damage and injuries on them. The more forging, which most metal things need, the less nasty. So there's wrought iron gates, and then there's awkward-looking weapons specifically intended to kill fairies. Megan thought about that a few seconds. So, if they heal from everything else, is that what happened to Aisling's wings? Lonnie was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. She doesn't like to talk about it. I think she'd even rather think someone mistook her for a butterfly. The Count was able to get her free, but someone knew exactly what they were trying to collect, and they came prepared. After thinking about that for a few seconds, looking at the black dot in the sky wheeling back towards them, Megan shuddered, then collected her things and started walking again. And it was really that big of a thing to the other pixies. It's like she doesn't even look at them. Pixies and their relatives are really, really social. That's even how their magic works. One pixie, can open some doors and windows and find their way around. Even she-lords and ladies usually don't mess with whole glimmers of pixies. Glimmers? Really? Yes, really. But the point is, pixies fly. Their whole life is based on it. Some of them might even have been weirded out by the reminder of vulnerability and activity and wanted her out of their pixie games, but mostly she just couldn't keep up. And then my dad took her in? Yes. Ashley always loved to explore, even before it happened, and she and the Count were buddies, playing tour guide for each other in fairy and on Earth. She knew all the pathways, and she'd flown all over the place. So your dad got a new scout and someone to check on you once in a while. He also recognized my excellent tactical skills and the Count's extraordinary knowledge of fashion trends. Before we came along, your dad had no idea how to accessorize properly. Aisling explained as the crow landed on Lonnie's shoulder. Of course, Megan replied, managing to smile and trying not to cringe at the sight of the tattered wings. On finally reaching the city gates, there was no mistaking it. The high fence was black iron with pointed tips. Where Onchakjiara might have had ivy or thorns, it had vines of additional iron woven throughout. Beyond the fence, she could see some of the buildings shuttered, with dark chains and a lock sealing every entrance. They stood outside the city for a while, studying the gate. Despite a careful search, there was nothing, literally nothing, to open the gate. Megan looked up at the wall of black iron lattice. The intricate weavings became tighter and tighter the higher it climbed. The wind whistled through the cold wrought gaps. No shrill, despairing cry, just a brief, indifferent ring. A middle C, maybe, Megan thought. Then she realized Aisling was trying to tell her something. I said we've checked, Aisling repeated pronouncedly as the Count found a place on the ground to land. There's only this one gate, if you can still call it a gate when it's locked this solid. No way in. Megan gave a short little exhalation, and the wind almost did with her. Did you hear something? She asked. Something on the wind? Lonnie sighed. No, Megan, I know it was awesome that your dad managed to get in touch, but that was a special case. The winds of fairy magic are very tricky, and they definitely won't work here. We're next to a giant wrought iron fence. That's really the bulk of a lot of problems. If you heard something, sometimes the wind is just the wind. And the wind kept whistling, but there was getting into the city to consider. Everyone looked at each other for a moment. Megan tried to reach toward the gate and then drew her hand back again. If the taste of chewing on aluminum foil could be transferred to the fingers, that would be it. Megan wiggled her hand to circulate the feeling away, happily distracted by the sound of wind through the now even creepier gates. The two of you could just fly over, Lonnie told Aisling and the Count. Aisling was actually at a loss for words for a moment. I couldn't get the sword myself. That was part of the point. And the Count doesn't have any hands. Megan didn't join the conversation, staring and reaching toward the twisted, seamless metal that seemed to be some sort of lock without a keyhole. That aluminum feeling in her fingertips was unavoidable. It was almost like a medication overdose concentrated on her skin. A shudder went down her spine, and the wind sang out through the gaps again, one of the brighter versions of the sound. There has to be something, Aisling said. Megan, you seem to have a knack with that bardic translation book. It's not going to be anything in a book, especially not one the Unseelie King had, Lonnie argued. If there's a fairy spell that can open it, that's not tauntingly unavailable, really. Megan let her do the arguing, her mind seizing on every stepping and skipping whistle of the wind as Lonnie filtered it out and focused on the main thing that was going on. It was the story of most of their lives, really. Megan absently swayed a little. C-E-G-E-C-E-G-E-F-A-C-A-C. She sing-songed smoothly, parroting the notes, but letting them flow together without the long pauses. For a moment, the wall seemed to vibrate, and then the seemingly seamless iron of the lock untwisted itself. The gate opened.